Okay, so all too often these days we see shocking news about violent deaths, unspeakable crimes, racial intolerance, abhorrent terrorist activities, bloody civil wars, and despicable lapses of ethics amongst politicians and religious leaders and business people. So how often have we found ourselves shaking our head thinking, what's the world coming to? But today I'd like to look at the context of the 24-hour news cycle and to take a larger look at global events and hopefully to leave you with some uplifting news. I remember in the first public talk I attended with His Holiness in 1992 in Seattle, I remember him shaking his finger at the press, admonishing them, saying, you should report about the genuine goodness of humanity. And really gave him a hard time. They haven't really listened to him, but anyway, you know the old media adage, if it bleeds, it leads. For example, in the 1990s, the number of wars in the world were going down, but people didn't realize this was the case because if a conflict quietly settled down or got resolved, it didn't make front page news. However, if a new conflict or war suddenly started, it got front page news. And this is still the trend. So no wonder we come away believing that things are much worse than they actually are. If it bleeds, it leads is something that terrorists rely on, right? If you think about the number of deaths, probably more people die of falling off ladders than terrorist activities. But those don't make front page news either. The Human Security Report tracks trends in political violence around the world, as well as their causes and consequences. They reported that from the 1940s to the end of the Cold War in 1991, there was a steady increase in the number of conflicts, and then they went down quite dramatically for the next 20 years. Did you know that? Since 2010, they have been going up again, as has the number of people being killed. Even though the level of violence that we have at the moment is pretty horrendous, compared to, say, the 1960s or the 1970s or 80s, it's still relatively small, they say, and is probably going to get smaller again. They say that there are some real prospects of ISIS being militarily defeated, but unless the regimes change that gave rise to it, we're not going to have stability for quite a long time. Terrorist and insurgency campaigns nearly always fail. That's the good news. That's some good news. So history shows there's no ground for pessimism about ISIS. Racial prejudice, on the other hand, might be a different matter. We see a whole series of important trends that make a difference. One cognitive scientist who studies the evolution of violence says, thanks to increases in social and economic development, as well as the spread of government, literacy, trade, and cosmopolitanism, we humans are increasingly controlling our impulses, empathizing with others, bargaining rather than plundering, debunking toxic ideologies, and deploying our powers of reason to reduce the temptations of violence. Does that get reported? In a recent interview in the Washington Post, His Holiness the Dalai Lama had this to say. Today there is no end in sight to the horrific violence in the Middle East, which in the case of Syria has led to the greatest refugee crisis in a generation. Appalling terrorist attacks have created deep-seated fear. While it would be easy to feel a sense of hopelessness and despair, it is all the more important, all the more necessary in the early years of the 21st century to be realistic and optimistic. There are many reasons for us to be hopeful. Recognition of universal human rights, including the right to self-determination, has expanded beyond anything imagined a century ago. There is a growing international consensus in support of gender equality and respect for women, as well as sexual orientation. Particularly among younger generation, there is a widespread rejection of war as a means of solving problems. Across the world, many are doing valuable work to prevent terrorism, recognizing the depths of misunderstanding and the divisive idea of us and them that is so dangerous. Significant reductions in the world's arsenals of nuclear weapons means that setting a timetable for further reduction and ultimately the elimination of nuclear weapons is no longer seems a mere dream. A further source of hope is the genuine cooperation among the world's nations towards a common goal, dealing with climate change. So if His Holiness is optimistic and has this bigger worldview, then shouldn't we follow his example? Here at the Abbey, the monastics start our day by sharing with each other what we feel grateful for. Reflecting on this myself and listening to others, I'm often surprised how much I have to be grateful for just in the previous day. And it's a real eye-opener. I highly recommend this practice. So just imagine if we had our own Buddhist news network. We could investigate and report on all the good that occurred in the world every day. So imagine headlines like this. Buddhist hermit in Dharamsala, India accomplishes perceptual realization of emptiness and achieves the Mahayana path of seeing. Wow! Wouldn't that be front page news? Revered Tibetan Geshe remains in Tukdam for 14 days after his death, revealing his true qualities. That sometimes makes back page news. Sokni Nanshin Nun from Tibet achieves uncontrived bodhicitta in 3-year retreat. Wow! Amazing! Our 18 students of the Shamatha project accomplished the first stage of calm abiding. Wow. 20 nuns from Jamshub Chuling Nunnery received their Geshe-ma degrees from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Yay! So every day we can stop to reflect on how many millions of random acts of kindness occur unnoticed, unreported, maybe not unnoticed, but unreported. How many millions of people overcome at least one urge to engage in a negative state of mind? How many moments of genuine love and compassion are expressed each day, each 24-hour news cycle that never get reported? So the moral of this story is keep your mind positive and share that positive mind with others. After all, Shantideva said it well, if something can be remedied, why worry? And if something can't be remedied, what's the use of worry? Such good mind training. So, have a good day.